What does the end of a country look like? What if a country, seemingly at its absolute peak of its cultural and technological power, just stops having children? This is the reality unfolding in South Korea. The nation that gave us Samsung, Squid Games, and BTS is pioneering a new kind of apocalypse, driven by a social breakdown so profound it's tearing the very fabric of society apart. And this is a deep story. It's a story of how a gender war is creating a demographic doomsday and why South Korea is a terrifying glimpse into the future for the rest of the developed world. The story starts with a low number. It broke the charts for human history. 2.1 children are needed to replace a population. The global average is around 2.2, but South Korea has hit a record low in all of human history, a catastrophic 0.72, and it is the lowest figure ever recorded by any nation. To be clear, this isn't a decline, it's a freefall. And guess what? In the city of Seoul, it's even worse, with a fertility rate of just 0.55. And population collapse is already here. South Korea's population peaked in 2020 with 51.8 million people, and it has been falling every year since. Its population is now projected to be cut in half to just 26 million by 2100, and that is a high estimate from the UN. In reality, it is likely to be much less than that. In fact, if fertility rates continue at their 0.7 levels as they are now, we can expect about a 70% decline in the population within the course of a lifetime. Maternity wards are closing, schools are being shut down. The death cross, where deaths outpace births, is now a permanent feature of South Korea. In 2023, South Korea only recorded 230,000 births, another record low. So why is this happening? Many would answer economics. It's a pressure cooker work environment, and it starts in early childhood with endless hours of private cram schools, a market worth over $20 billion a year. And it continues into adulthood with a brutal work culture and some of the longest hours in the developed world. The cost of living, especially housing in Seoul, is astronomical. The city's property price to income ratio has soared to over 15-1, making home ownership a statistical impossibility for most young people. So the economic despair is real and it is measurable. South Korea's household debt is now 100% of its GDP, one of the highest ratios in the world. And in a stunning sign of stagnation, South Korea's economy, measured against the US dollar, was actually smaller in 2023 than it was in 2018. So effectively no economic growth over the course of 5 years. But perhaps the economics is just the kindling. The gasoline that has turned this into a civilizational firestorm is the gender war. What's happening there is not a disagreement. It is hostility and a foundational schism between young men and women who increasingly view each other as hostile political actors. According to a 2022 survey, nearly 70% of men in their 20s hold a negative view of feminism. To understand this conflict, you need to look at the historical roots. For decades, a cultural preference for sons has amplified the availability of prenatal screenings and created one of the most skewed gender ratios at birth on the planet. At its peak in 1994, the ratio reached a shocking 117 boys for every 100 girls. Even as late as 2000, it was still around 113 to 100, where the ratio of men to women aged 15 to 45 is around 110 to 100, or about 52.5% male. And this has been a pretty stark problem since about 1975 until 2010, where there was a large gender imbalance at birth favoring men. So this imbalance has two profound effects. For a generation of women, this number was a brutal confirmation of their status as what could be seen as second-class citizens in a society that would literally erase them from the future. But of course, for men during this period, it created a demographic trap, a marriage market with a fundamental surplus of men, creating intense competition for partners that continues to this very day. And this didn't just create tension, it created a gender divide between men and women, which is now at the heart of this conflict. Many young men now feel victims of a system that has turned against them. They point to the country's mandatory military service, a grueling, nearly 2-year commitment they feel is a form of punishment. Online, in digital communities, they rally against what they see as radical feminism, blaming it for society's ills. And this sentiment has been weaponized by politicians, most notably President Yoon Suk-yeol, who won the election in 2022 partly by promising to abolish the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. This anti-feminist backlash is so potent that South Korea's gender gap in political views is now wider than that of any country on earth. On the other side, the response from women has been just as fierce. Faced with a society that has one of the worst gender pay gaps in the OECD of 31%, and essentially a motherhood penalty that can end careers, many women have declared the system as unfixable. And this has culminated in the 4B movement, a pledge for no marriage, no childbirth, no dating, and no baby making. It is the ultimate rejection of what many women see is a system that heavily favors men. And what we have are two sides, men and women, that are profoundly divided, but need to bridge that division in order to make children for the next generation. In a nation where having children outside of marriage is just 3% of all births, no marriage effectively means no babies. But meanwhile, the number of marriages has plummeted by over 40% in just the last decade. A recent poll found that 50% of unmarried South Koreans in their 20s and 30s do not even plan to marry in the future. Many women question whether they should sacrifice a career in a society that offers them little support and where the opposite gender is often seen as an adversary. A recent poll found that only 4% of unmarried South Korean women in their 20s and 30s believe that marriage and having children were essential parts of life. So we have a doom spiral in action. Economic pressures fuel social resentment, the gender war shatters social trust, and the collapse of marriage leads to the collapse of births. And it is a spiral that keeps getting worse. By 2034, it is projected that people over 65 will outnumber children under 14. Meanwhile, in rural areas, hundreds of schools have closed. The military faces a conscription crisis. The pool for available 20-year-old men is expected to be cut in half within 15 years. The country also faces a humanitarian catastrophe with its elderly, with the highest elderly poverty rate in the developed world at 40%. And the government has tried to fix this, but it is not working. They poured over $280 billion into pro-natal policies, and the birth rates keep falling. You cannot solve a crisis of societal trust with cash subsidies. The future of South Korea is one of marriage decline and is a cautionary tale of what happens when a society becomes so divided by gender that it loses the will to create its own future. So South Korea might as well be Exhibit A for civilizational collapse that will happen in the 21st century. It shows a nation can climb to the highest peaks of innovation and culture only to fall off a cliff of its own making. The question for the rest of the world is, are we paying attention? Because South Korea's doomsday isn't just their story, it might become our own. So how do you see South Korea's demographic collapse playing out? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. This has been Blinded by Logic. Thank you for watching.